in color. This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Eric Severide in Washington, Bob Gregory at Walter Reed Army Hospital, Bruce Morton in Jacksonville, Florida, and Haywood Hale Broon in Mexico City.
Good evening. Wally Schirra, for all the discipline of a lifetime as a Navy pilot, is a lovable individualist. Saturday, as the commander of Apollo 7, he testily refused to follow the flight plan or the orders of ground controllers and turn on his television camera to give Americans their first live pictures of astronauts in space. For the day, he finally turned the camera on, but he had ready a couple of old pointed jokes, though, invoking a pair of old radio bromides to point out that he thought the space program had put him in show business. The little 4.5-pound camera can transmit only about 10 or 12 minutes a day to ground stations in Corpus Christi and Cape Kennedy. And here is how the historic first broadcast went today. The first voice is that of Paul Haney at Mission Control, Houston.
Here comes the picture, and it's white. We look at Isley, a nice shot. It looks straight up, and he's moving, and he's really quite clear. Let's all have a look at it.
Hey, you're picking up. I can read it now. Just a minute. It says from that lovely Apollo something. You guys should write high atop something. Looks good. I can see Wally handle it now, and Don has a smile on his face, and there's Walt. The definition is pretty good down here. I can see the center hatch. Actually, I'm amazed. It looks real good. Hey, Don, how about saying something since you're panned?
Say again?
Hey, I can read you. I can see you loud and clear. It really looks good. I'm amazed.
Coming in heads down, you want us to point?
Lean back a little bit. You're too close to the camera. There you are. We'll have Cecil B. Stafford down here directing.
You forgot to shave this morning, Isley. Lost my razor.
Yeah, some of the reproductions here are real good. I can look out through Wally's rendezvous window, and I can see the coas up there, the Orbrate ball.
Right down the Gulf Coast.
Okay, what's the next one? A little closer, Wally. It says, keep those cards coming. Keep those cards and letters coming in, folks. It's loud and clear.
That's a pretty show for the whole family. Would I take a little out the window of the TV camera? I can give you New Orleans right here.
Okay, let's take a look and see how New Orleans is this morning.
Apollo Control here. You were listening primarily to Tom Stafford talk with the crew, and Deke Slayton threw in a couple lines. Here we are with a view out the window.
Looks like there's a few clouds down there. There, yeah, we can see it. Is that the coastline you're panning right now?
Going over Montreal now, quickly, and then that's becoming across Pensacola shortly.
Okay, Wally, can you focus on one spot for a minute? You can see the orbital rate coming in real fast. There you go. Try to hold it on one spot. Now you can see the coastline.
There's a Tinkerbell north of Pensacola that are all train on.
Okay.
Well, a beautiful day, you're right. We should give you a good shot of the Cape today.
All right. Yeah, there's the coastline. It's coming in good. Real good.
I think the kicker of the fact the calculation we used for alignment was what?
That's the Florida Peninsula we just crossed in about 1 minute.
The interior pictures were truly remarkable, and a second television transmission from the Apollo spacecraft will be carried live by CBS tomorrow morning. Wally Schirra permitting, the transmission expected around 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. The top Soviet space expert is now attending an international space conference in New York, and today, in answer to newsmen's questions, he claimed that the Soviet Union has no plans for manned flights to or around the moon in the next year, but such flights are under study, he says. Professor Leonid Sedov's statement, if true, indicates that the United States, with plans for a circumlunar flight as early as December and a lunar landing by next fall, has a clear lead over the Russians in the race to the moon.
It used to be, lady, you had no rights. No right to vote, no right to property, no right to the wage you earned. That was back when you were laced in, hemmed in, and left with not a whole lot to do. That was back when you had to sneak up to the attic if you wanted a cigarette. Smoke in front of a man? Heaven forbid.
You've come a long way, baby, to get where you got to today.
Introducing new Virginia Slims, the slim filter cigarette for women only, tailored for the feminine hand. Slimmer than the fat cigarettes men smoke, with a kind of flavor women like. Rich, mild Virginia flavor. New extra long Virginia Slims in the slim purse pack.
You got your own cigarette now, baby. You come a long, long way.
At Walter Reed Army Hospital in Washington, former President Eisenhower marked his 78th birthday today. He entered the hospital exactly 5 months ago, following what turned out to be the first of his 4 latest heart attacks. His recovery has been, in the words of his doctors, remarkable. And today, they allowed the Army band to serenade him. Bob Gregory reports.
Looking down from his 4th-floor suite, Mr. Eisenhower listened happily as the United States Army Band and Chorus gave him their birthday present of music. Beside him was Mrs. Mamie Eisenhower, who seemed to enjoy the 15-minute concert as much as the general. Included were most of Mr. Eisenhower's favorites, popular ballads, rousing military marches, and sentimental Army songs. Frequently, Mr. Eisenhower, in his first public appearance since last August, either saluted or waved a small 5-star flag that symbolizes his rank. The band's tribute was also reaction to President Johnson's proclamation that this week the nation salutes Eisenhower. Today's occasion coincided with the report of his doctors that Mr. Eisenhower is now able to walk briefly as he continues his miraculous recovery from his 7th and possibly worst heart attack last August. Of all the music played, the Eisenhower seemed particularly to enjoy a medley from one of their best-liked shows, The Sound of Music. General Eisenhower once said, "A concert by the Army Band helps a man appreciate his country." But today, the concert was part of the country's appreciation of the man. Bob Gregory, CBS News, Washington.
A Los Angeles judge today set a new trial date of December 9th for Sirhan Sirhan, the 24-year-old Jordanian immigrant accused of assassinating Senator Robert Kennedy. The defense said it needed more time to prepare the case. 24 convicts at Cummins Prison Farm in Arkansas were wounded today when guards fired at least 2 shotgun blasts at a large group of prisoners who had refused to go to work. None of the inmates was reported injured seriously, although a number were hospitalized. Prison authorities said the action was justified and that the convicts had organized a work stoppage to protest prison conditions. For the 3rd time in 5 weeks, New York teachers today struck the nation's biggest school system. The issue was the same as before, a demand by union teachers for reinstatement and protection of 80 members of an experimental and decentralized school district in Brooklyn. 80,000 striking soft coal miners and operators today signed a new contract that gives the workers a wage increase of $7 a day over 3 years, and the workers are returning to their jobs immediately. Prices were higher today on the New York Stock Exchange. The volume was 12 million shares, and the exchange index gained 8 cents.
So it's your job to hold down company expenses. Face it, rising costs are going to make things tighter. And tighter. And tighter. But there's one business expense that doesn't have to go up every year. The cost of group accident and health insurance. Connecticut General has a new 3-year rate guarantee, so you can be sure the cost of group insurance won't have to go up for 3 full years. You'll have a little breathing room. Ask a CG man about it. Aren't things tight enough already? At Connecticut General, we do things a little differently. Connecticut General Life Insurance Company.
A state-by-state study by CBS News today shows a drop in Richard Nixon's electoral vote strength in the last week. The study, based on analysis of various state opinion polls and interviews with political leaders, also shows a slight gain for Hubert Humphrey. If the election were held today, Nixon could expect to carry 29 states with 289 electoral votes. Now, this is more than the 270 needed to win, but it is a loss of 56 since last Monday. A large part of this is the shifting of New York from the Nixon column to the uncertain column. George Wallace could expect 7 states with 66 votes, no change, and Humphrey could expect 2 states in the District of Columbia with 29 votes, a gain of 19. The study lists 12 states with 154 electoral votes as toss-ups. The vice presidential candidates conducted a major part of today's campaigning. Both Senator Edmund Muskie and Governor Spiro Agnew concentrated on the New York metropolitan area. General Curtis LeMay appeared in Washington before departing on a fact-finding visit to Vietnam. Tonight, in the second of our 3 comprehensive reports on these running mates, Bruce Morton takes a look at the Republican governor of Maryland.
Governor Agnew's campaign is like what happened to him on the golf course one day. The first drive was out of bounds. Second drive, second slice, second out of bounds. But the ball hit a tree and ricocheted back on the fairway.
I knew it was a Republican year.
As a campaigner, Agnew has made mistakes and stirred more argument than most vice presidential candidates, but the polls show his side ahead.
Well, I'll always shake hands with the opposition.
I'd love to meet you, sir. Thank you very much.
Richard Nixon's press aide, Herb Klein, said early that Agnew would be an attacker. The governor calls himself a counterpuncher, and he's kept at it, as when Hubert Humphrey charged that Nixon was ducking the issues.
What is Mr. Humphrey's record of speaking out on the issues? Where was he when the challenges came in the spring from Senator McCarthy and Senator Kennedy to discuss the issues and take his case to the people in the Democratic primaries? Mr. Humphrey ducked every contest. He refused every debate. For 2 months, while those primaries continued, Mr. Humphrey hid behind the skirts of the President of the United States.
But some attacks backfired. Agnew called Humphrey soft on communism and apologized. He got in trouble again over a public reference to Polacks and a private joke about a reporter whom the governor knew well and called the Fat Jap. The story broke in Hawaii, where a candidate expects nothing but pleasure and sun, but which has a lot of Japanese-American voters. Agnew, perhaps because of his own ethnic background, saw nothing wrong with this kind of kidding. He was hurt by what happened to him and answered in the most emotional speech of his campaign.
If I have inadvertently offended anyone, I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. To those of you who have misread my words, I only say you've misread my heart.
The main attack against Agnew, aside from Democratic jubilation over his mistakes and apologies, has been that Nixon chose him to placate the South, to win back votes swayed by the segregationist rhetoric of George Wallace.
I really don't think that washes when you look at the record, my record, in the state of Maryland. It's not a conservative record. It's a very moderate record, one I'm very proud of, and it's been under quite a bit of scrutiny, and I just don't think that anyone could say at this stage of the campaign that I would appeal to a particular block of voters. I try to have wide appeal to all moderate-thinking people.
But in Jacksonville, Florida, with Claude Kirk to introduce him and George Wallace's song for an overture, the Southern spell seemed very strong.
One of America's great guys and the next Vice President of the United States and his lovely lady, the attractive Mr. and Mrs. Ted Agnew.
In fact, Agnew says Wallace's domestic policies are unacceptable. But in the South, he concentrated on the argument that Wallace votes are a wasted protest, a protest which should go to Richard Nixon. And throughout the campaign, Agnew has hit many of the Wallace themes: the need for an end to violent dissent, an end to student riots, urban burnings, the need, in short, for law and order.
A report recently released by that great American J. Edgar Hoover, and I'm proud to call that man a great American, indicates that serious crimes have increased 57% in 7 years. That 2/3 of all the crimes of violence are committed by young people under 21 years of age. It tells me that the permissiveness that pervades our society, that's encouraged by those who rationalize and excuse lawlessness of any form, who allow any form of dissent as long as the so-called objective is meritorious, are tearing down America today.
Agnew, not Nixon, has drawn the heaviest Democratic fire. The Nixon people like that. Nixon's the statesman above the battle, they say, while the Democrats' number one man attacks our number two.
Mr. Nixon has already made his first appointment. Spiro T. Agnew. Now listen to what the Washington Post said. Mr. Nixon's decision to name Agnew as his running mate may come to be regarded as perhaps the most eccentric political appointment since the Roman Emperor Caligula named his horse a consul. I want you to think, as I say, President Agnew.
How do you feel about yourself, about your qualifications for the vice presidency?
I think I'm qualified. I have the capacity in my judgment to make the decisions and the overall intelligence and ability to perform the office. I've successfully performed in the governorship, and I think that my presence on the Intergovernmental Relations Committee has given me a voice that's been respected and listened to on the national scene.
Agnew's strength as a campaigner lies not in eloquence or new ideas. It lies in a rapport with ordinary middle-class whites. I like him, they murmur during the rallies. I like what he says. They react because he seems one of them, the kind of man who might be and was president of the local PTA. He shares their worries about what is happening to the middle class, their fears of crime, of violent dissent, of militant blacks. He shares their limitations, too, their short horizons. Agnew's critics say that if this is his strength as a campaigner, it is also his weakness as a vice presidential candidate, as a man who could be president of the United States. Bruce Morton, CBS News, with the Agnew campaign.
Can the right denture cleanser really make a difference? Listen to what Mrs. Kathleen Healy thinks.
I feel so confident knowing my dentures are really clean, odor-free, thanks to Polident tablets.
Polident tablets fight denture stain and odor safely. Look, this denture material is covered with a tough food stain. Drop it into water with an effervescent Polident tablet, And in minutes, your dentures are cleaner, brighter, fresher. Get Polydent tablets.
Listen to all the ways Corriga denture adhesive helps people with loose, false teeth.
Corriga holds so tight I can eat almost anything.
Listen.
Corriga, nothing else ever got me through the day with such confidence.
Listen.
With Corriga, my mouth feels comfortable. Tastes nice and clean.
New Corriga does so much, helps you forget you're wearing false teeth.
Congress adjourned today after a session marked by defiance of the White House and yet some surprising legislation considering its conservative move. Eric Severide examines the record. Eric?
The 90th Congress, which closed its doors today, cannot be called a do-nothing Congress, as President Truman called the 80th and won his point by re-election. The 90th was a do-quite-a-bit Congress. The trouble is that the people don't seem much interested, and part of the reason for this is that the actions of the Congress proceed on a very broad front and often take a long time to affect the individual citizen. Actions by the executive or by the court are somehow more dramatic, easier for people to focus upon. The legislative accomplishments of this Congress were not as massive as those of President Johnson's first 2 years in office, but they do include an historic open housing law, a tax surcharge, striking advances in housing construction and financing, in education and conservation, and a gun law with at least a preliminary set of teeth. This Congress stalled on the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, one of the world's most important items of business, battered the Supreme Court with political bludgeons, cut the liver and lights, if not the heart, out of foreign aid, and ran for cover on the bill to permit television debate between the presidential candidates. A lame duck president rarely has the power over Congress that a new president enjoys. And the theory last spring that by taking himself out of and above the political battle, Mr. Johnson would enhance his authority, this has not worked out where the Congress was concerned, and so far at least has not produced a Vietnam peace settlement either. This was an independent-minded Congress. It acted in the liberal tradition at times and began to reflect what seems to be a general conservative drift in the country at large. The incoming Congress, by present signs, is not likely to be much different. Current surveys indicate both houses will again be under Democratic control. If Mr. Nixon, Republican, is the president, he will find himself working through the old, familiar Southern Democrat, conservative Republican coalition, which his campaign strategy has indeed encouraged. And he is not likely to have the effective cooperation of a powerful Democratic majority leader, as President Eisenhower had it for years in the person of Senator Lyndon Johnson. There is no such leader around in either house. Walter?
Arizona's 91-year-old Carl Hayden, retiring after 56 years in Congress, was the Senate's temporary presiding officer on adjournment today. Hayden heard a round of tributes to himself and 9 other senators who also are leaving office this year. In Vietnam, communist forces today renewed their attack on Quang Ngai and a nearby government military post with a barrage of 17 powerful 140-millimeter rockets made in Russia. 8 persons were killed and 23 others wounded. Quang Ngai is considered a prime target in enemy efforts to cut South Vietnam in two, and was the scene of heavy fighting just last month. The Supreme Court today agreed to decide whether the armed forces may court-martial servicemen for offenses committed on leave. It's an authority the military has exercised since the Civil War without the High Court ever ruling on the question. In another case today, the court decided not to try to determine how long a schoolboy's hair should be. With only Justice Douglas dissenting, the court voted against hearing the appeal of 3 Dallas boys who were ordered to trim their beetle-type hair or stop attending high school.
This woman has what every woman wants. Soft hands and hard nails. No lotion can give you both. Only gloves can help. Playtex gloves. They're fully lined to keep your hands safe from water that's too hot, rough cleansers, detergent that's too strong. Yes, Playtex gloves can help you have soft hands and hard nails. Buy now. Get an extra glove free. Almost like 2 pair for the price of 1.
Ellen, I've got the solution.
Not a padded bra.
No, this is slightly padded.
Slightly padded?
Just a 1/16 of an inch lining. Adds shaping, not inches. And it's a Playtex Cross Your Heart. You know, crosses your heart with stretch, lifts, separates, you're suddenly shapelier.
1/16 of an inch.
Adds shaping, not inches.
The new Playtex Cross Your Heart slightly padded bra. Sometimes a little can do a lot.
Czechoslovak Premier Chernik flew to Moscow today, his fourth trip there since Soviet troops occupied his country August 20th. Reportedly, Chernik is working out final details of a treaty that will legalize the occupation. It's believed that the Soviets have agreed to pull out the majority of their troops by winter if Prague continues to reverse its program of liberalization. Teams from Russia and Czechoslovakia among those competing at the Mexico City Olympics, of course, and as we learn in this report from Haywood Hale Broom, the political chill between the two nations extends to their athletes.
It is said in the editorials that the Games always invoke that politics plays no part in the Olympics, but certainly it was not admiration for their athletic feats that made 80,000 stand and cheer when the Czechs entered the opening ceremonies, while the applause for the Russians was the kind of polite Ivy League spatter which Yale men produce for Harvard. At the Olympic Village, Czech and Russian high jumpers practice together with the icy unconcern of men who have to cork their feelings with the Olympic code. Elsewhere in the village, the groups coalesced in clusters which were as exclusively of a piece as college fraternities. When they met in the nominally friendly strife of sport, they faced each other with the punctilious chill of duelists at dawn, anxious not to show the weakness of bad manners or the opposite weakness of palliation. With the irony which peppers the somber stew of history, the first meeting between the two countries was in the far outfield of ladies' volleyball. At first it appeared that the fire which has been burning in the Czechs would sweep them past the highly favored Russian girls, and the crowd chortled happily as the underdogs ran off with the first game by a 15-7 score. A Czech with a banner led the cheers, and the Mexicans dutifully learned and repeated his hand-lettered "Do toho," "Let's go" sign. It was a false dawn for the hopes of the fans, however, and suddenly it seemed as if there could not have been any other result, as the Russian girls swept the necessary 3 games, keeping the ball in play against every kind of attack. A ball is not a bullet, but sometimes it came close. A delegation of Californians in straw hats kept cheering the Czechs till almost the end. But the first game was the only triumph for romance over the rationality of superior power and skill. The crowd relieved some of its frustration by booing all official calls against their favorites. At the finish, both captains shook hands with the officials and marched off together, side by side, looking straight ahead, while the Olympic dove's feathers flew under the impact of a chant discernible in the din of Dubček, Dubček, Dubček. This is Haywood Hale Broom at the Gimnasio Olimpico in Mexico City.
And that's the way it is. Monday, October 14th, 1968. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
That is my position. Any questions?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Larry. Can you clarify?
Larry, what is it?
I only have one.
One what?
Cavity.
Mr. Mayor, is that a significant improvement?
Very.
What do you attribute it to, Mr. Mayor?
Well,
Dad, Mom changed the crest, remember?
That's right. Crest.
Can you substantiate that, sir?
Put it this way. We've tried a lot of toothpaste, but Crest, best checkup ever.
Sir, do they all have stannous fluoride?
Well, let's set the record straight. Crest is the only one of the 5 front runners with stannous fluoride, and you can't buy a better cavity fighter.
The other 4, are they recognized by the American Dental Association?
No, only Crest.
Larry, which Crest flavor do you prefer, regular or mint? Both.
A real politician, this one.
Have checkups, watch treats, and brush after eating with Crest.
This has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. See the CBS Playhouse presentation tomorrow night on